A biplane is a fixed-wing aircraft with two main wings stacked one above the other. The first powered control airplane to fly. The Wright brothers used a biplane wing arrangement, as did many aircraft in the early years of aviation. While a biplane wing structure has a structural advantage over a monoplane, it produces more drag than monoplane wing. Improved structural techniques, better materials, and a higher speed made the biplane's configuration obsolete for most purposes by the late 1930s. So today in this video I'm going to talk about two main reasons why biplanes are not common today. Before going into that, first we should understand why biplanes existed. In 1804, George Kelly is first to build a glider that could fly for a few seconds carrying a person. George Kelly was an English engineer who managed to study the flight of birds and understand it to apply it on the first machine heavier than air. It is called that since by then there were already hot air balloons and similar airships labeled lighter than aircraft, but nothing like an airplane. He was a man who identified the forces acting on the flight: lift, weight, thrust, and drag. He also performed some aerodynamic experiments and discovered that wing with a curvature was more efficient in producing lift. In fact, the Wright brothers studied his work and researched to build their plane. The plane developed by the Wright brothers was called the Wright Flyer, and it was a biplane since the material available at the time were wood and fabric. To cover the wings, they needed to make a fairly strong and lightweight structure. The configuration of two wings, one above the other, has the advantage of having more structural strength. They are reinforced using some pillars and tension lines. The other important advantage was the lift generated by two wings compared to one wing. You can fly at slower speed and with shorter wings, something that came in handy, especially if the engines from before didn't have much power either. But placing a second wing doesn't double the amount of lift generated by the wings. In fact, the lift is just 20% higher. This deficiency is because of the proximity and position of the wing. Both interfere with each other in terms of aerodynamics. It turns out that biplanes was the most structurally safe configuration, and that guaranteed the flight of the machine. Then the First World War came. Some people tried to redesign these airplanes with only one wing, but it was the engines at the moment were not powerful enough as the planes of today to propel the aircraft at a higher speed at the same time, and engines were somewhat heavy, so removing a wing reduces that little extra lift that it can provide. So the airplane needs more speed and less weight to take off. Something that cannot be done with the engines at that times, but it was possible to make a single-wing airplane as we know them today. Second, the wings should be a little longer. This will surely make the airplane fly. The problem is that a long wing are weak and not very resistant to aggressive maneuvers, and to be used in the war with these aggressive maneuvers was not recommended. It is possible to make the wing shorter, but more speed is needed to keep flying. Now, if you want to keep the wings shorter, you will need more speed, and that requires a powerful engine. So overall, it was all about having a better engine. That will eventually comes the engines. Remember that the materials were used still wood and fabrics. Biplanes were the standards. After the First World War, aluminum alloys began to used in the aircraft structures, enforcing the structural performance and allowing designs of monoplanes to be usable.